police, open the door now." The words hit like a thunderclap, shattering the early morning stillness. My heart jackhammered in my chest as I bolted upright in bed, the remnants of a dream about fishing on Lake Serenity evaporating. The clock read 7:03 a.m., and the relentless pounding on my cabin door grew louder, more insistent. I stumbled out of bed, bare feet slapping against the cold wooden floor, my mind racing to make sense of the chaos. Who could be at my door? I'm Jake, just a regular guy, a 34-year-old graphic designer who'd saved 4 years to buy this slice of paradise by Lake Serenity. This cabin was my escape from the city's noise, a place to breathe, fish, and recharge. But now it felt like a war zone. I threw on a hoodie, my hands trembling as I fumbled with the zipper. The banging didn't stop. "I'm coming," I shouted, my voice hoarse with sleep and panic. Peering through the window, I saw 2 police officers standing on my porch, their faces stern under the brims of their hats. The morning sun glinted off their badges, and one held a clipboard with papers that looked official. My stomach dropped. Had I done something wrong? Was there an emergency? I swung open the door, the crisp autumn air hitting me like a slap. "Jake Thompson?" the taller officer asked, his tone clipped. I nodded, my throat dried. "We've got a complaint from the Serenity Shores HOA. Says you're violating their regulations." His partner handed me a document, a formal-looking letter with the HOA's logo, a pretentious crest with waves and a sailboat. I stared, dumbfounded. "HOA? What HOA? I'm not part of any HOA." My voice cracked, a mix of confusion and indignation. I'd bought this cabin 6 months ago, a small 2-bedroom haven on a half-acre lot, free and clear. The realtor swore it was outside any homeowners association. I'd double-checked the deed myself. No covenants, no restrictions, just my land, my rules. The officers exchanged a glance, unimpressed. "Says here you're in violation of residency rules," the second officer said, tapping the clipboard. "Unauthorized occupancy. You need to address this with the HOA." I scanned the letter, my eyes catching phrases like non-compliant property and immediate action required. My blood pressure spiked. "This is my property. I own it outright. There's no HOA here." I gestured toward the lake, where my dock jutted out, my little fishing boat bobbing gently. The cabin was modest cedar siding painted a deep blue, a wraparound porch perfect for coffee at sunrise. It was my dream, and now it felt like someone was trying to steal it. The taller officer shrugged. "We're just following up on the complaint. Contact the HOA and sort it out. We'll be back if they call again." His tone was matter-of-fact, like this was routine. To me, it was anything but. They turned and headed to their cruiser, leaving me clutching the letter, my bare feet freezing on the porch. I watched them drive down the gravel road, their tires kicking up dust that hung in the air like a bad omen. Closing the door, I leaned against it, my mind spinning. Who were these people? Why were they targeting me? I'd moved here for peace, not to be harassed by cops over some non-existent HOA. I sat at the kitchen table, the letter spread out in front of me. The Serenity Shores HOA claimed my cabin was within their jurisdiction and that I was breaking rules I'd never agreed to. They listed violations. My blue exterior was unapproved. My dock was non-compliant. Even my mailbox, a quirky metal fish I'd found at a flea market, was in violation of aesthetic standards. I laughed, but it was a bitter sound. This was absurd. I'd chosen this property precisely because it was outside the HOA's boundaries. The real estate agent, a chatty woman named Linda, had shown me the plat map, pointing out how my lot sat, just beyond the Serenity Shores development. I'd paid a premium for that freedom. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the deed, stored in a PDF from the closing. My eyes scanned the legal jargon, landing on the keyline. "This property is not subject to any homeowners association or restrictive covenants." Clear as day. So why were the cops at my door? I called Linda, who was as baffled as I was. "Jake, I don't know what's going on," she said. "Your lot is definitely not in their HOA. I'll dig into it, but you should call a lawyer." A lawyer. I'd barely settled in, and now I needed legal help. I felt a mix of anger and dread. This wasn't just a mix-up, it felt like an attack. I stepped onto the porch, coffee in hand, trying to calm down. The lake sparkled under the morning sun, a soft breeze rustling the pines. My cabin was perfect, rustic but modern, with big windows, framing the water, a wood stove for chilly nights, and a hammock where I'd planned to read all summer. I'd spent months fixing it up, sanding floors, painting walls, building that dock with my own hands. It was my sanctuary. But as I sipped my coffee, the HOA's letter loomed in my mind. Who were these people, and why were they coming for me? I didn't know it then, but this was only the first salvo in a war I hadn't asked for. The cops would return for more times, each visit escalating the fight. Little did I know, I'd soon take the Serenity Shores HOA to court and win big. The first police visit left me rattled, but I figured it was a mistake that could be cleared up with a phone call. I was wrong, dead wrong. Over the next 3 months, the Serenity Shores HOA turned my peaceful lake cabin into a battleground. The cops showed up 4 more times, each visit chipping away at my patience and turning my dream retreat into a source of dread. What started as a single complaint morphed into a relentless campaign of harassment that felt like a personal vendetta. I wasn't just fighting a faceless organization. I was up against a group of self-appointed overlords who seemed to think they owned my land and me. The second police visit came 2 weeks after the first. On a Saturday afternoon, I was sanding a new bookshelf for the cabin when I heard the familiar crunch of tires on gravel. 2 officers different from the first pair stood at my door, holding another HOA complaint. This time it was about my boat dock, a sturdy little platform I'd built myself for my fishing skiff. Unapproved structure, the officer read off the paper. I laughed, incredulous. Unapproved by who? This is my property. I showed them my deed, the same one I'd triple-checked after the first visit, clearly stating my half-acre was outside the HOA's jurisdiction. They didn't even glance at it. Take it up with the HOA, they said, leaving me fuming on the porch. The third visit was worse. It was a rainy Tuesday evening and I'd just settled in with a beer and a book when the pounding started again. This time, the complaint was about my mailbox, that quirky metal fish I'd found at a flea market. The HOA called it aesthetic non-compliance. I couldn't believe it. My mailbox, really? I tried explaining, again, that my property wasn't under their control, but the officers just handed me another letter demanding a $200 fine. By the fourth visit, a week later, they claimed my blue cabin exterior violated their neutral color palette. I was starting to feel like I was in a bad movie. Each visit came with a new ridiculous accusation, and the fines piled up. $200 here, $300 there. I refused to pay a dime. Why should I? I wasn't part of their club. The fifth visit pushed me over the edge. It was a crisp morning, and I was out back splitting firewood when the cruiser pulled up. This time, the HOA claimed I was operating an unauthorized residency, whatever that meant. The officers looked almost apologetic, like they were tired of being the HOA's errand boys. Look man, just call them, one said before driving off. I was done being polite. These visits weren't just annoying, they were humiliating. Neighbors started whispering, peeking from their windows whenever the cops showed up. I felt like a criminal on my own land. Then came the night I caught Karen, the HOA president, in the act. It was around 9 p.m. and I was washing dishes when my motion sensor light flicked on. Through the window I saw a figure near my dock, holding a phone, snapping photos. I grabbed a flashlight and stormed out. "What are you doing?" I shouted. Karen, a middle-aged woman with a clipboard and a permanent scowl, didn't even flinch. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," she snapped, like I was the one trespassing. "This property is an eyesore and you're lowering our community's value." I was livid. "This is my land. You have no right to be here." She scurried off into the dark, but not before I got her on my phone's camera, her face illuminated by the flash. That encounter lit a fire in me. Karen's snooping wasn't just nosy, it was illegal. I started digging deeper, determined to understand why the HOA was targeting me. I spent hours poring over county records online, confirming my lot was outside their boundaries. I called the realtor, Linda, again, who was horrified. "They're overreaching," she said. "Your land was never part of Serenity Shores." I even talked to a neighbor, Tom, who lived just outside the HOA zone like me. He'd gotten similar letters but caved and paid a fine to avoid trouble. "They're bullies," he warned. "They'll keep coming until you fight back." The HOA's letters kept arriving, each more threatening. One demanded $1,000 for ongoing violations. Another warned of legal action if I didn't comply. The worst was a notice claiming they could force compliance by seizing my property. Seize my property. The audacity made my blood boil. I started keeping a file. Every letter, every police report, every threatening note. I set up security cameras around the cabin, catching Karen and another board member sneaking onto my land twice more. Each time, I felt more violated. Like my sanctuary was being invaded by people who thought they owned me. I wasn't just angry, I was scared. The constant police visits were draining, and the HOA's threats made me wonder if they could actually take my cabin. I'd sunk my savings into this place, every penny earned from late nights freelancing. The cabin wasn't just a house, it was my dream, my escape from a stressful job in a noisy city. The idea of losing it to a power-hungry HOA was unbearable, but fear turned to resolve. I wasn't going to let Karen and her cronies win. I started researching lawyers, determined to fight back. This wasn't just about my cabin anymore, it was about standing up to bullies who thought they could control everyone. Little did I know, this fight would lead to a courtroom showdown that would change everything. Enough was enough. The Serenity Shores HOA had crossed every line, and I wasn't going to let them bully me out of my own home. My lake cabin, my sanctuary, bought with years of savings, was under siege, and I was ready to fight back with everything I had. The constant police visits, Karen's trespassing, and the HOA's absurd threats to seize my property had turned my dream retreat into a nightmare. But I wasn't just angry, I was determined. If they wanted a war, I'd give them one, a legal one. This wasn't about paying fines or changing my mailbox anymore. It was about standing up to a group of power-hungry busybodies who thought they could control land they had no claim to. I was going to build a case so airtight they'd regret ever knocking on my door. First, I needed evidence, hard proof that the HOA had no authority over me. I started with my deed, the one I'd shown the cops to no avail. I pulled it up on my laptop, reading every line of the dense legal text. There it was, clear as day. This property is not subject to any homeowners, association, or restrictive covenants. I printed multiple copies and highlighted the key section. Next, I drove to the county recorder's office, a 30-minute trip through winding roads lined with pines. The clerk, a kind older woman named Betty, helped me pull the plat map for my lot. It confirmed what I already knew. My half-acre sat just outside the Serenity Shores HOA boundaries, a fact the realtor had emphasized when I bought the place. I paid for certified copies of the deed and map, clutching them like a lifeline back at the cabin. I organized every piece of correspondence from the HOA. The stack was intimidating. 5 police complaints, 8 demand letters, and a final notice, threatening legal action to enforce compliance. Each letter was more absurd than the last, demanding fines for my blue cabin $300, my dock $500, and even my fish-shaped mailbox $200. I sorted them chronologically, noting dates and violations, and stored them in a labeled folder. These weren't just letters, they were evidence of harassment. I also pulled the police reports from each visit, which I'd requested from the sheriff's office. The reports were dry but damning, documenting the HOA's baseless complaints and the officer's indifference to my deed. Then there was Karen's trespassing. After catching her snooping that night, I'd invested in a security system for cameras covering my property. The footage was gold. I had 3 clear clips of Karen and another board member creeping around my dock and mailbox, taking photos, like they were detectives in a bad TV show. One clip even caught Karen muttering about teaching me a lesson. I backed up the footage on a hard drive and made time-stamped notes. Trespassing was illegal, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I also started a log of every interaction, from police visits to Karen's glares when I passed her in town. It felt obsessive, but I knew details would matter. Finding a lawyer was the next step. I spent hours online, reading reviews and forums about HOA disputes. That's how I found Sarah, a property law attorney with a reputation for crushing overreaching HOAs. Her website boasted a 95% success rate, and her no-nonsense vibe gave me hope. I called her office, and we met the next day at a coffee shop in town. Over lattes, I spilled the whole story: the cops, the letters, Karen's trespassing. Sarah's eyes lit up. "This is a slam-dunk case," she said, flipping through my folder of evidence. "They're overstepping their authority, and we can prove it. Let's sue for harassment, trespassing, and defamation." I hadn't considered that, but Sarah explained the HOA's public complaints were painting me as a lawbreaker, damaging my reputation with neighbors. We built a lawsuit together. Sarah drafted a complaint outlining the HOA's actions: 5 unwarranted police visits, trespassing, and false claims of authority. She added a claim for emotional distress, noting how the constant harassment had turned my peaceful retreat into a source of anxiety. The legal fees were steep, $10,000 up front, with more if we went to trial, but I was all in. I'd spent my savings on this cabin, and I wasn't going to lose it to Karen's power trip. Sarah had me sign affidavits and compile a timeline of events. We even tracked down my neighbor Tom, who agreed to testify about similar HOA harassment he'd faced. The HOA didn't back down. A week after we filed the lawsuit, I got a cease and desist letter demanding I comply with regulations or face eviction from my own land. The audacity floored me. Sarah laughed when I showed her. "They're digging their own grave," she said. "Keep documenting everything." I did, adding the letter to my growing file. I also posted about my ordeal on X, venting about the HOA's tactics. To my surprise, my posts got traction, with locals sharing their own HOA horror stories. The support fueled me. This wasn't just my fight anymore, it was for everyone who'd been bullied by an HOA. I was ready for court, ready to expose Serenity Shores for what they were: bullies with no power over me. The morning of the trial felt like stepping into a boxing ring. My stomach churned as I walked into the county courthouse, a squat brick building that smelled of old wood and coffee. I was Jake, the guy who just wanted to fish and sip coffee by Lake Serenity, now facing off against the Serenity Shores HOA in a legal battle I never imagined. My lawyer, Sarah, stood beside me, her sharp suit and confident nod calming my nerves. Across the room sat Karen, the HOA president, and her board, their faces a mix of smug certainty and barely concealed irritation. They thought they'd crush me, a lone homeowner daring to challenge their authority. But I had evidence, a plan, and a fire in my gut to end this nightmare. The courtroom was packed. Neighbors, reporters, even curious locals who'd seen my story on X. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with steel gray hair, called the room to order. The HOA's lawyer, a slick, guy in a pinstripe suit, went first. He painted me as a troublemaker, claiming my non-compliant cabin, dock, and mailbox were disrupting community harmony and lowering property values. He argued my land benefited from the HOA's oversight, implying I owed them obedience. I nearly laughed out loud. Benefited from 5 police visits and threats to seize my property. Sarah squeezed my arm, whispering, "Let them talk. They're digging their own grave." When Sarah took the floor, she was a force. She started with my deed, holding it up like a trophy. "This document, certified by the county, proves Mr. Thompson's property is not, and has never been, part of the Serenity Shores HOA." She projected the plat map on a screen, pointing out my lot's clear boundary outside their jurisdiction. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Karen's face tightened. Sarah didn't stop there. She presented the stack of HOA letters, each one a baseless demand for fines over my blue cabin, dock, and mailbox. "These are not requests," she said. "They're harassment, plain and simple." Then came the security footage. The courtroom screen lit up with grainy night vision of Karen sneaking onto my property, snapping photos of my dock. A second clip showed her and another board member near my mailbox, whispering and pointing. The jury leaned forward, riveted. Sarah's voice was ice cold. "This is trespassing, a clear violation of Mr. Thompson's rights." She played a third clip, where Karen muttered about teaching him a lesson. The judge's eyebrows shot up, and Karen shrank in her seat. Sarah followed with police reports from all 5 visits, highlighting how each was triggered by the HOA as false claims. "They weaponized law enforcement to intimidate my client," she said, her words landing like punches. The HOA's lawyer tried to recover, arguing their actions were in good faith to protect the community. Sarah shut him down with a single question. "How is sending police to a property you have no authority over good faith?" The room went silent. The judge scribbled notes, her expression unreadable. Then it was my turn to testify. I took the stand, heart pounding, but Sarah's prep had me ready. I told my story, how I'd saved for years to buy my cabin, sea-decided retreat with lake views, only to face relentless harassment. "I just wanted peace," I said, my voice steady, "but they sent cops to my door, trespassed on my land, and made me feel like a criminal." I described the sleepless nights, the neighbors' whispers, the fear of losing my home. The jury's eyes were locked on me, some nodding slightly. The HOA called Karen to the stand, and it was a disaster. She rambled about maintaining standards, but faltered when Sarah cross-examined her. "Did you verify Mr. Thompson's property was in your HOA before filing complaints?" Sarah asked. Karen stammered, admitting she assumed it was. "Assumed," Sarah pressed. "You sent police 5 times based on an assumption." Karen's face reddened, and the jury exchanged looks. The HOA's case was crumbling. Their lawyer's final argument was weak, repeating vague claims about community values. Sarah's closing was a masterpiece. The Serenity Shores HOA abused their power, harassed an innocent homeowner, and wasted this court's time. Justice demands accountability. The jury deliberated for only 2 hours. When they returned, the foreman read the verdict: guilty on all counts: harassment, trespassing, defamation, and emotional distress. They awarded me $150,000, $50,000 for damages, $50,000 for legal fees, and $50,000 in punitive damages to send a message. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Karen's face went pale, her smugness gone. The judge banged her gavel, glaring at the HOA board. "You've wasted resources and caused undue harm," she said. "Consider this a warning." I shook Sarah's hand, my eyes stinging with relief. I'd won not just for me, but for everyone bullied by an HOA as we left the courthouse. The weight of months lifted and I felt my cabin calling me home. Walking out of that courthouse was like stepping into sunlight after a long, dark storm. My legs felt shaky, but my heart was soaring. The jury's $150,000 award, $50,000 for damages, $50,000 for legal fees, and $50,000 in punitive damages was more than a win. It was a resounding victory against the Serenity Shores HOA and their reign of terror. I, Jake, the guy who just wanted to fish and relax at my Lake Serenity cabin, had taken on a bully and come out on top. The weight of months of harassment, police visits, Karen's trespassing, threats to seize my land lifted as I stood on the courthouse steps, breathing in the crisp June air. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was a triumph for anyone who'd ever been pushed around by an overreaching HOA. The money was a game changer. First, it covered Sarah's legal fees, which had climbed to $12,000 by the trial's end. I'd worried about the cost, dipping into my savings to fund the fight, but the award wiped that slate clean. The remaining $138,000 was mine to keep, and I knew exactly how to use it. My cabin, the sea-decided retreat I'd poured my heart into, deserved some love. I hired a local contractor to repaint the exterior a bolder shade of blue, take that HOA, and built a bigger, sturdier dock for my fishing boat. I even splurged on a new mailbox, an even flashier metal fish with shimmering scales, just to rub it in. Every upgrade felt like a middle finger to Karen and her cronies, a reminder that this was my land, my rules. The fallout for the HOA was swift and satisfying. My story exploded on X, where I'd posted updates during the ordeal. Within days of the verdict, my posts racked up thousands of likes and retweets, with locals and strangers alike cheering me on. "You're a legend, Jake." One user wrote, "Screw HOS," said another. People shared their own horror stories, fines for lawn ornaments, threats over fence colors, even lawsuits for planting unapproved flowers. My victory resonated, sparking a mini movement against HOA overreach. A local news outlet picked up the story, running a segment titled "Lake Cabin Owner Fights HOA and Wins Big." I watched it from my porch, coffee in hand, grinning as the reporter called the HOA's actions a gross abuse of power. Karen, the HOA president, didn't last long. A week after the trial, I heard through a neighbor that she'd resigned, unable to handle the backlash. The HOA board sent me an apology letter, stiff, formal, and clearly written under duress by their lawyer. "We regret any misunderstanding regarding your property's status," it read. Misunderstanding. I laughed and tossed it into my evidence folder, now a trophy of my fight. The board went quiet after that. No more letters, no more cops. My neighbor Tom, who'd faced similar harassment, stopped by with a six-pack to celebrate. "You did what I couldn't," he said, raising a beer. "Here's to no more HOA nonsense." With the HOA off my back, Lake Serenity became the paradise I'd always envisioned. I spent weekends fishing off my new dock, the lake's surface, glinting like glass under the summer sun. I'd grill burgers on the porch, invite friends over, and swing in my hammock with a book, the pines whispering in the breeze. The cabin was mine again. No more waking up to police knocks. No more Karen skulking in the dark. I added solar lights along the path to the dock, their soft glow making nighttime fishing magical. Every moment felt like a gift, a reminder of what I'd fought for. The wind changed me, too. I'd always been a quiet guy, content to keep my head down. But standing up to the HOA, speaking in court, seeing my story inspire others, it gave me a new confidence. I started a blog, sharing tips for fighting HOAs. Check your deed, document everything, get a lawyer like Sarah. Comments poured in from across the country, people thanking me for showing them they could fight back. One woman wrote, "Your story gave me the courage to sue my HOA. I won last week." That meant more than the money. If you're facing a bully HOA, don't let them intimidate you. They thrive on fear, counting on you to cave. But you have power. Gather evidence, letters, footage. Find a lawyer who knows property law. Post your story online. You'll find allies. My fight started with a police knock and ended with a $150,000 victory. Now I'm back to fishing, grilling, and living my lake life, free at last. You can do it too. Fight smart, stand tall, and you might just win big like I did.